Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Dell Networking OM Tech Talk. Today's feature, we're going to talk about advanced performance monitoring. I have Brandon Norgard here as my panelist to walk us through some of the advanced features in the monitors. This session will be recorded and it will be distributed after the session. If you do have questions along the way, please feel free to enter them into the question window or click on the little hand icon to raise your hand, and we'll try to get to those questions at the end. That said, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Brandon.
All right, thank you for coming here. And so last Tech Talk, we talked about how performance monitoring works in general. Now, we did cover a lot of the features last time, but there are some more advanced features through which you can really get the data that you're looking for, and you can really control how things work. So I think, let's go ahead and start on this default interface monitor, or not necessarily the one that's seated, but you also have the ability to create these, SNMP interface. This one is set up for you, but you can create more than one of them if you want to have a little bit of a nuance for the different ones. But let me just go ahead and edit this entry here just to show you some of the nuanced features that we have available. Some of them, they're showing up here on this monitor options. Now, I believe in the last Tech Talk, we did actually talk about some of this. Maybe there's just a little bit that we'll brush up on here. But first of all, I want to talk about the monitor options. We have this special little section here for SNMP interface properties. Now, most of the time, this isn't really stuff that you need to worry about. But we have a lot of there's old devices. There's obsolete. Well, they're not obsolete if you're using them, but some of the old devices that just work differently than the ones that you have now. You might still need to use those. So we have special ways of dealing with that. For example, some of them. Now, just to talk a little bit about the difference between reachability and availability. Okay, so if I can reach the device and I know that it's there, then it's reachable, but it might not be available. And this applies especially to subcomponents like interfaces. We can see that there is an entry on the device that says it's there. We can reach it, but it might be that it's just not available at the moment. So we have special ways of dealing with that, and we have availability and reachability checks. But for some of the old devices, you want to be able to skip that because it doesn't actually have that. You can check this. Now this is actually, you can check this to skip it altogether, and maybe you only want to do it every 2 or 3 polling intervals because you can have some intermittent availability issues that you don't want to be, essentially spammed with all of that, because your alarms window should be a succinct list of the actual issues with your devices, so that you can just go there and you can see what the problems are, what you need to respond to, and you don't want all that white noise. So we also have this here: use not reachable as not available, and that just if there's a device that doesn't actually support the notion of having something be available, so you can just check that. So most of the time, you're not really that interested in these 3. Fortunately for the new devices, you're really not. So this right here is also useful, is that the first generation devices supporting SNMP, they had the if table through which you get all of these information here. And this is very essential for calculating these metrics that we're interested in: the bandwidth received, utilize, transmit. So we need to get this raw data in order to do that. And the first generation had what's called the if table. More recent devices have a if X table, which got even more accurate information for that. So if you have this checked, it's not going to use this OID specifically. It's going to actually go to this other if X table in order to get that. Now, there's really no problem. There shouldn't be any harm in checking that for everything, because it's going to default. There's a mechanism behind the scenes that says, okay, well, this device is, it's an older device that doesn't have an if X table, so we're just going to use the if table for that. So, but most of the time, I guess you probably don't need to worry too much about that. But those are some options available for to deal with those nuances. Now, I think there was perhaps one thing that we didn't talk about the last time as well, to where how this relates to, let's say, I'm looking at the default ICMP monitor, and we have this availability events on the general screen, and that's really important because that is how we can see when we're on the resources. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? It's right there. We have that. Just a moment. Yeah. So we can see, is it responding? So that's really useful for that. Let me go back to it here. And it is. I'm sorry. It's actually this one. Update network status. You wouldn't have that checked on the default interface monitor, but on the default ICMP monitor, you would. And so that also impacts when we have the topology view. So basically everything you're getting from these monitors here, it impacts what you see on the topology, the network view, what color these show up as. Not just the devices themselves, but so I would think most of the time it's your ICMP monitor that would impact the color of the device as a whole. But I can also drill in and I can see what we have for the different subcomponents. Now this one doesn't have subcomponents, but if you did, those would come from those interface monitors.
So essentially there is a trap that indicates that it's no longer available via ICMP, and that rolls up to a trap that shows up on topology?
Yeah. And so let me just go back to this here, back to performance. All right, so I think we also wanted to talk about just how the mechanism works for the calculated metrics. So we have this here. Let me go back to these calculate metrics. Each one of the raw attributes we're collecting is assigned a letter, and then we can put in a formula here. So just to tell you a little bit about how this works, we have a difference between, for one thing, we have a difference between a counter and a gauge. So that's a gauge is like, say you're on your dashboard on your car. You're going between 0 and 100 miles an hour. And so it doesn't matter how many miles you've traveled up to that point. So it might be, though, that when you're pulling this data, it tells you only the total amount since that device was restarted, even though what you're interested in is how many has changed. So if you need to say that it's a gauge, in which case otherwise it'll just keep counting and counting and counting. And and sometimes you do want a counter. Sometimes you want every time you pull it, it's gonna that's going to already have that factored in as what has changed since last time. So in which case you'd say it's a counter. So we also have what units there are. Maybe it's a percent, or maybe it's bits per second or something. You can change that right here. And so and if you know that there's a certain maximum value that it doesn't make sense for this to be above something, and that applies if it's a gauge, you can put that in there as well. Okay, now there's also another thing we didn't cover last week, which is the inventory mappings. Now, we can see this here, especially on the seated default interface monitor. We have a number of different. I mean, you're just looking at this, you probably say, okay, well that's obvious. This is the same thing as that. Well, what this means though is for the attributes that we're collecting here and we are calculating, we have a formula for that. How that maps into these specific attributes that we have portlets for. And this way, just to show you here, since we have that mapped, I can go to the top N and I can see all of this. So, where does that come from? Where does it might be that you want to change what monitor this data comes from, or you maybe want to have it come from 2 or 3 different monitors and all compiled together. So you can use that to do that. And we have all of these portlets here for the interface bandwidth, interface errors, top ping response, and in fact, we even have more than are even seeded here. I mean, all you got to do is go to that add applications and then type in top, and you will see quite a few of them. So not all of these are necessarily seeded to a monitor out of the box. It might be that you, okay, well, I want top MOS. You know, if I add that, I probably won't get any data, because what I would have to do is I would have to assign a monitor. I would have to create a monitor that is polling for the MOS, and then use that tab on the monitor to associate it to the inventory mapping. So it's really powerful that way. That way you can just go to that page, the top end page, or you can put those top end portlets on some other page, and you can just see right there what's going on. You know, it's a really easy way to do it, to see the monitor data. Well, there's also a more detailed way of seeing the monitor data. You can see if there's any one of these that is active, you can always go and you can see, I just want to view the raw data. So you can see what I did just now. I clicked on view monitor data. It brings me to this screen here. And you'll probably have to go to this red icon and change what columns are showing so that we can see, you know, maybe I'm interested in the inbound ICMP requests and the errors, you know, and grams. Then I can actually see that information here, and then I can filter by it too. I can always say, I mean, there's a lot you can do here. I could even say, you know, I'm interested in the whole date time within a certain range, or a specific, you know, maybe I'm only interested in something where this is greater than a certain value here. You know, and I can do that. Okay, I'm not sure. Did we cover conditions last time?
Briefly, we went over conditions.
Briefly. Okay. Well, that's another. You know, I think we did. I think I remember talking about. We did talk about conditions. Probably don't really need to mention that again here. Let's see. I think. Is there anything else here we want to talk about?
If anyone has questions, again, feel free to enter them in the chat window there, and we'll answer those. Specifically on monitors, we talked about the view monitor data and the raw data.
Yeah.
So on conditions and thresholds, can those be used together? And so, yeah, the answer to that is yes. You can define thresholds.
I would recommend that for each attribute here, you know, that you can apply it either to the raw values that you're getting or to the calculated values. But for any one of those, you would want to have probably either a threshold or a condition. So the threshold is something where it's just one dimensional, and if it's numeric, and if it's above or below some value, then it's crossing that threshold. So therefore, you want to emit an event to that, and that event could turn into an alarm. It could change the severity of the subcomponent or the device as a whole, and it can propagate to different places. You have all kinds of power to deal with that. You can forward it. There's a lot of options that you have for what you want to happen when these events are emitted. But you have to get them first. So you set these conditions, either a threshold or a condition to do that. Now, like as I was saying, the thresholds are quite simple. It's just you know, did it go above some value or not? You know, just numeric. The conditions, on the other hand, are not just one-dimensional, but you know, maybe you want to say if this value is above X, and this other attribute is below this, or in this range. So you have more options there. I can show you here. So in count, let's say greater than 5. And this, I'm not sure, this is probably a realistic use case, but just to give you an example of what you can do between, you know, 4 and 7. So the benefit of the thresholds is those are going to show as as bands of color, of background color on the dashboards. But there's no way to do that with a condition because you can have more than one factor. But nonetheless, both of them can emit events, and you have more control. You have more options for this if it's a condition. As you can see here, I can combine two or more attributes together to figure out if it meets that condition. Just give you an example real quick. Let's go to the network dashboard, and you can see the background colors for the thresholds here. Yeah, you can see them right here. So that you can only get those background colors based on thresholds. But nonetheless, I could have the conditions built in. It's just a little more difficult. You can't really visualize that. But you could. There's a box that I could check on that screen to say whether it is a trendable attribute, to say whether it meets that condition. How many times per hour, what percent of the time per hour does it meet that condition? I could do that, and I could actually graph that as well. So just let me go back to that real quick. Yeah, so I could create a condition here, and I would check to say it's trendable, and that would just let me graph it. You know, it's going to be a true or false condition, but over the course of an hour, it's going to let you aggregate on it, and also over the course of a day, so you can see what percent of the time it's meeting that condition. Okay, let me see here. Got another question. Is there a way last pulled date time or raw monitor data for each? I'm sorry. Can I select a specific port or interface to be a monitor target? Yeah. So the way that the default interface monitor is set up, it is set up to with all devices, but there are specific sub-conditions where it's going to implicitly target all those within where the administrative state is up, and you can put in other conditions. And this applies to the ports, and this applies to the interfaces, you know. But if I wanted to, actually, I could add even more specific. I could add an explicit target alongside it, and that'll show up here. So I can add as many of those as I want. Okay. Let's see, we have more questions?
Back on the inventory mapping. So that relates directly to the top end and what shows up on the top end portlets. Could you again go back over just quickly on how I map an attribute and how it will actually show up?
Yeah, let's say we want to add a new one. So there's quite a few of them already, but as I was saying, like the example of the Moss score, you know, I might have that here. Okay, I guess I don't. I have a few of them, but I think that it would be a different kind of monitor in which the Moss Moss score would show up here. But we have CPU utilization, for example. That's one, and so this is useful as well to talk about something that I think that we wanted to talk about, which was the key metrics monitors. That's where you can have monitors that you know they are gathering data that is common across multiple devices, but the implementation is dependent on the vendor. So they all have, you know, for example, CPU usage, and I want to see maybe across all my devices, several different vendors, which one has high CPU usage. Well, the key metrics monitors let you do that. It lets you say, you know, let's say I want to create a key metrics monitor here.
This is an example of the inventory mapping.
Well, it could become that as well. So let's just say this is CPU, and so I can have among these common attributes CPU utilization, and if I put in, you know, something like all devices right here. So all devices that across all vendors, they all have a different. They're going to have a different way of implementing CPU utilization. But this monitor is smart enough to know how to do that. It knows how to go to the different devices and get that information. And then I can create an inventory mapping specifically for CPU utilization. And it can show up then, if I have this, it will show up in the CPU portlet. I think I might already have one. So that was a test where, you know, it's probably duplicating what was already there, but just maybe I'll go back and I'll disable that one because we already kind of had it seeded. Probably this default CPU, that's what the default CPU monitor actually is already doing, but if you wanted to change the way this works just a little bit, then you can do that as well. So yeah, it already has that inventory mapping there. Okay. Let me just disable this one here. All right. Do we have other questions? Let me just see here.
Yeah, I'd like to open it up to not only performance monitor questions. If there's any other questions on OpenManage in general, please feel free to put those in as well.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, remind everyone that these Tech Talks will be uploaded to the YouTube site. And I guess we have one comment here. Someone's asking about the last Tech Talks haven't been uploaded yet. But we'll make sure that those do get uploaded. Okay.
All right, I'll give it a second here, see if there's any more questions. Okay, if that's looks like it, and I think we're going to conclude this this series on performance monitoring. This is second part of a multi-part series, and so we'll have some more additional information on advanced monitors in future talks. All right, thank you everyone, and we'll see you next time.